You know that feeling, right after the words have already left you. That sudden, quiet sense of loss. As if you've just given away a piece of something still forming inside. Something that wasn't ready to be seen. And now a part of your own energy has simply slipped out of your hands. It's a subtle theft. No one took anything from you. You offered it. You spoke when the inner world was still tender, still arranging itself. And in that moment, you diluted its power. The great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung saw this not as a social mistake, but as one of the most profound psychological errors a person can make, revealing what is still unconscious, still in motion. This isn't about becoming closed off or secretive. It's about understanding a fundamental principle of inner maturity. True strength isn't built in the spotlight. It's forged in the quiet. And there are specific things, four, to be precise, that a person who is growing into their full power learns to hold in sacred silence, not to hide from the world, but to protect the world they are building within. If you're ready to explore that boundary, to learn what to safeguard, let's begin. 1. Why silence is the architect of the inner world. Jung presented a counterintuitive truth. Most of our psychological suffering doesn't come from what others do to us. It comes from what we prematurely hand over to them. Every thought, every nascent feeling, every fragile intention carries a charge of psychic energy. When you give it voice before it has solidified, you are essentially inviting the outside world to walk through the construction site of your soul. They will comment on the unfinished walls, question the blueprints they can't fully see, and without meaning to, their mere presence can alter the architecture. The damage is never immediate. It's osmotic. It seeps in, drop by drop, until the original vision feels foreign, touched by too many hands. So what is Jungian silence? It is not mere quietness. It is the active, deliberate withdrawal of projection. We are constantly projecting the contents of our unconscious onto people, situations, and our future. We hand them the script to our inner drama and ask them to play a role. But when you choose silence, you are doing something radical. You are taking back that script. You are reclaiming that psychic energy and letting it circulate within. You stop casting others in your play and start directing it yourself. In that reclaimed quiet, the unconscious, what Jung called the other whom we do not know, can do its work. It realigns, heals, and integrates without the static of external opinion. This is not a passive act. It is an intensely active cultivation of your inner soil. Have you ever noticed how the loudest rooms often feel the emptiest, and how the quietest moments can feel the most densely populated with meaning? That's the psyche reorienting itself to its own frequency. Think of a friend. Let's call him Alex. Every time Alex had an inkling of change, a career shift, a creative project, a personal insight, he would immediately broadcast it. He'd seek opinions, parse reactions, and gauge enthusiasm. But the more he talked, the more the original impulse faded, buried under a landslide of well-meaning feedback. He confessed once, "I have 10 voices in my head, and only one of them might be mine." It was only when he forced himself into a season of quiet, when he stopped seeking chorus for his solo, that the noise settled. The path, once cluttered, became clear. His inner world needed not more discussion, but undisturbed space to assemble itself. This is the silent mechanism. When you speak, you grant the world interpretive authority over your life. When you are silent, you reclaim that sovereignty. Look at individuals of deep, sustained accomplishment. Their silence isn't secrecy, it's conservation. They understand that anything being born, an idea, a healing, a new direction, requires incubation. Growth rushed is fragile. Growth nurtured in silence becomes unshakable. Picture a master glassblower shaping a delicate vessel. If he exposes the molten glass to a draft too soon, It cracks. It must be held in the protected heat of the furnace until its form can withstand the air. Your nascent self is that glass. Silence is the furnace. Now, have you ever shared a cherished dream, only to have it met with a casual, offhand remark that somehow deflated your entire passion? It wasn't malice. It was a collision of frames of reference. Your fragile, forming reality met their solid, settled one, and yours yielded. Their comment wasn't about your dream. It was a reflection of their own world, their own limits, their own unseen fears. But in that moment, you allowed their map to override your inner compass. So, this first silence is not about isolation. It is about preservation. It is the ultimate act of self-respect, honoring your own process enough to let it cook in its own time, at its own temperature. It is saying, this is mine to gestate, and I will not outsource its formation. 2. Do not share your plans and goals. Now, let's apply this to one of the most common energy leaks, your plans and goals. This goes deeper than avoiding jinxing it or not showing off. On a Jungian level, this is about libido, not in the sexual sense, but as the fundamental life force, the energy of motivation and becoming. In its earliest stages, a goal is a pure stream of this libido, searching for its channel. The moment you speak it, you divert that stream. You scatter its focus. You transform an internal driving force into an external social object. And once it's out there, it's no longer solely yours. It's subject to the gravity of other people's minds. Jung observed that the act of speaking often provides a premature sense of accomplishment. You get a hit of dopamine, a social reward, that tricks the psyche into feeling progress has been made. The libido meant for action is spent on narration. A viewer once told me he was a serial starter. He'd have a brilliant idea, immediately tell his friends, feed off their excitement, and then never begin. The validation from speaking replaced the necessity of doing. His libido was vaporized in conversation. The goal became a story he told, not a future he was building. The psychic energy dissipated into the air, leaving nothing to fuel the arduous, quiet work of actual creation. This is why so many New Year's resolutions die in the telling. The declaration itself provides a false summit, and the real climb never begins. Through a Jungian lens, your unmatured plan is like a seed in its germination phase. It is vulnerable. It needs darkness, moisture, and containment. To speak of it is to expose it to sunlight too early. Even warm, encouraging sunlight can dry it out. A skeptical comment can be a frost. The seed doesn't need an audience. It needs the silent, fertile soil of your inner world. Your goal doesn't need cheers. It needs undivided libido. What's the deeper danger here? When you vocalize a plan, you unconsciously transfer part of your authority to your listeners. You now carry not only your own intention, but also the weight of their expectations, their worries, their projections. Your motivation, which should arise from the deep self, gets tangled with the need to prove, to explain, to avoid looking foolish. You are no longer acting for yourself. You are performing for a ghost audience. That is exhausting, and it is why so many resolutions wither. The goal morphs from an internal compass point into a burdensome performance metric. But in silence, something beautiful occurs. The libido, with nowhere external to go, turns inward. It gathers force. Discipline emerges not as a struggle of will, but as a natural current of concentrated energy. You are not relying on external encouragement. You are building a covenant with yourself. The confidence that grows from this is of a different quality. Quiet, solid, unshakable, because it was never dependent on anyone else's gaze. You will know it's time to share not when you seek validation, but when the momentum is so strong that no outside opinion could possibly alter your course. That is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, acting from your true center, not from social feedback. Your actions become authentic expressions, not pleas for approval. And this creates a flywheel. Authentic action builds genuine confidence, which fuels further authentic action, all in a self-sustaining loop that exists within you, impervious to external weather. 3. Do not share your fears, insecurities, and wounds. This leads us to a more tender domain. Your fears, your insecurities, the soft, bruised parts of your inner landscape. Surely these should be shared. Aired out? The modern mantra is radical openness. But Jung offers a crucial, nuanced warning. These elements are part of your shadow, the repository of all we disown, fear, and reject in ourselves. And the shadow can only be integrated in the right container, with the right level of consciousness. Not every ear is the right container. Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." The path to embodying it is not necessarily through exposure. A wound does not heal faster simply because it is shown to more people. In fact, placing your shadow material into hands that are not equipped to hold it can be re-traumatizing. They may, with all good intent, project their own fears onto yours, amplify your anxiety, or subtly confirm your deepest doubts. You walk away, not lighter but carrying your shadow and a piece of theirs. The burden doubles, the confusion compounds, and the original message of the fear, its instructive purpose, is lost in the crossfire of unconscious projections. I recall a client, Sarah, who struggled with a deep-seated feeling of being an imposter. In moments of anxiety, she'd confide in a colleague who had her own unprocessed fears of failure. Sarah's confession of "I feel like a fraud" would be met with, "I know. This place is so cutthroat, you have to be perfect." What was a fluctuating inner state became, through this reflection, a concrete truth. Her shadow was not being healed. It was being mirrored and magnified by another's unintegrated shadow. Sarah's fear was a signal from her psyche, pointing to a need for greater self-validation. But the colleague's response framed it as an accurate reading of external threat. The signal got hijacked, and the path to integration was blocked. This is the risk of indiscriminate sharing. You outsource the interpretation of your inner world to someone who may be just as lost in theirs. The ancient myth of Pandora's box is instructive here. The box contained not evil, but all the potentials of human experience, both light and dark. The catastrophe wasn't the contents. It was the opening of the container before humanity was ready to hold what was inside. Your fears are like this. They are potent, meaningful parts of your totality. Revealing them to someone without the depth or stability to contain them is to open the box prematurely. The misfortunes that spill out are confusion, distorted perception, and a loss of inner authority. Your private struggle becomes a public drama with unintended characters and plot twists you never authored. So, what is the alternative to venting? Jungian dialogue. This means turning toward the fear in silence. Sit with it. Listen to it. Write to it. Ask it what message it carries. Fear is not here to destroy you. It is a messenger pointing to where you have not yet grown, where your ego feels vulnerable. The fear of abandonment may be pointing to your need to develop self-reliance. The fear of failure may highlight an over-identification with perfect outcomes. When you face this messenger alone, you integrate its lesson. You build inner muscle. You learn that you can contain your own darkness. This cultivates a courage far more potent than the temporary relief of sharing. It is the courage of self-containment. It's the difference between screaming into a storm and learning to read the weather patterns within yourself. One leaves you hoarse and unheard. The other makes you a master navigator of your own inner climate. Therefore, there are fears you should never share. Not out of shame, but because their integration is sacred. Inner work. Holding them close is not avoidance. It is the respectful, courageous process of making them whole. It is treating your psyche with the reverence of an archaeologist handling a fragile, ancient artifact in a clean room with careful tools, not in a crowded marketplace. This doesn't mean never seeking therapy or trusted counsel. It means choosing that counsel with immense discernment, ensuring it's a container designed for integration, not just a sounding board for amplification. 4. Do not talk about what you are leaving behind. There is a third category of silence that is equally vital: what you are moving away from, the paths you are choosing to abandon, the identities you are shedding. Psychologically, this is a critical transition phase. Your libido is withdrawing from an old attachment, an old identity. This energy is in a state of flux, pulling back to the center to be reinvested in something new. It is a vulnerable, delicate operation, like a plant withdrawing sap from an old leaf before it falls. If you announce this transition, you invite the world to comment on a process it cannot see. People know you in your old role. Their sense of stability is often tied to you remaining in it. So their response is, "Are you sure? But you're so good at that. That's so risky," are rarely about your journey. They are about their own unconscious need for predictability, their own unchallenged assumptions, or even their own latent regrets about paths not taken. And a single doubting question can be enough to snap that withdrawing libido back into the old pattern, out of sheer psychic inertia. You find yourself defending a choice you've already made internally, wasting energy on explanation instead of navigation. The energy for building the new bridge is spent arguing about leaving the old shore. Take Michael, a gifted accountant who felt a deep calling toward landscape architecture. The work was stable, but his soul felt arid. When he tentatively mentioned this shift to family, the concern was immediate. "But you've built such a secure career." That one reaction planted a seed of doubt so powerful it took him 2 more years of burnout to finally make the leap. He didn't regret the time lost as much as the betrayal of his own inner whisper, which he had allowed to be shouted down by well-meaning external voices. His family's frame of reference was security and linear progression. His was meaning and soulful expression. By speaking into their frame, he allowed their language to define his experience. And in that language, his calling sounded like recklessness. Neuroscience echoes this. When the brain begins to rewire, to leave an old neural pathway for a new one, the prefrontal cortex needs focused quiet. Introducing social feedback activates the amygdala, the fear center, which screams, "The old way is safer. Go back." Your silent inner knowing is overridden by the ancient alarm system. The new neural pathway, still a faint deer trail, is abandoned for the well-paved superhighway of your old habits and others' expectations. So, silence here is protection for your own metamorphosis. You do not need a committee vote to close a chapter. The libido needs a closed system to complete its withdrawal. Think of a sailor quietly turning the ship before a new heading. If he announces the turn too early, everyone rushes to the deck with opinions on the course, the weather, the maps. The simple, necessary act of turning the wheel becomes a public debate. Turn in silence. Steer in silence. Let the new direction become undeniable before you announce the destination. Let the landscape change around you first. Let people see you in the new place, rather than hear about your intention to go there. Action is infinitely more persuasive than announcement. This silence honors the old version of you that served its purpose, and it safeguards the new version struggling to be born. Not everything you release requires a eulogy. Sometimes the most respectful farewell is a quiet glance over the shoulder, and then eyes firmly forward. It is an understanding that transformation is an inner ritual, private and sacred. You are not abandoning who you were. You are integrating it into who you are becoming, and that alchemy happens best in the sealed vessel of your own conscious attention, away from the oxidizing influence of public opinion. 5. Do not speak of your achievements, money, or success. And this brings us to what may seem the most paradoxical silence. The silence around your victories, your gains, your tangible success. We are conditioned to celebrate, to share wins. But from a Jungian perspective, success is easily co-opted by the persona, the social mask we wear, the face we present to the collective. When you speak of success, you often aren't sharing from the deep self. You are feeding the persona. And anything that inflates the persona risks alienating you from the self, creating what Jung called inflation, a state where you become identified with your own mask, losing touch with the humble, complex human being underneath. Jung saw the ultimate aim as the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Your achievements are mile markers on that journey. But when you display them, you place them in the arena of social comparison. They are no longer yours alone. They become objects for others to measure, envy, or use to define you. A friend finally bought her dream home after years of sacrifice. When she shared the news, the responses were tinged with subtle undercurrents. Wow, big spender. Or must be nice. Her private joy was suddenly laced with a strange defensiveness and pressure. The achievement now came with invisible baggage. She felt she had to perform a role, the humble successful person, or the grateful achiever. Her authentic satisfaction was diluted by the need to manage other people's perceptions of her success. Success spoken too soon is like a young sapling exposed to strong wind. It needs the shelter of stillness to deepen its roots. When you proclaim it, you invite the winds of others' expectations, envy, and judgment. You may start making decisions to maintain an image, rather than follow your true north. Praise can addict you to performance. Skepticism can make you doubt your worth. Your intrinsic motivation, the deep, quiet joy of mastery, gets replaced by a need for external validation. You begin chasing the next hit of recognition, rather than the next step of genuine growth. The compass shifts from internal fulfillment to external applause. Psychology confirms this. Publicly declaring goals can satisfy the brain's reward system enough to diminish the drive to actually complete them. The same applies to achievements. Sharing the win can dilute the satisfaction, making you seek the next hit of recognition rather than the next step of genuine growth. The dopamine comes from the telling, not the doing. And so you're driven to tell more, often at the expense of doing the deeper, quieter work that leads to lasting fulfillment. Those who are deeply grounded are often discreet. They let their results speak. They understand that what is built in silence carries a different substance, a substance that cannot be shaken by opinion. True success doesn't need a spotlight. It emits its own steady light. By holding your accomplishments in quiet reverence, you keep them connected to yourself, not your persona. You own them completely, free from the need to manage anyone else's perception. This creates a profound inner stability. Your sense of worth becomes non-negotiable, because it was never on the table for discussion. It was a private fact, witnessed and celebrated first and foremost by your own soul. This is how you avoid the hollow feeling that so often follows public acclaim, the "is this all there is?" sensation. Because the real reward was the journey itself, the person you became in the process. And that is an internal trophy no one can see, but everyone can feel in your presence. 6. When silence becomes who you are. After understanding why we protect plans, fears, departures, and successes, a deeper layer emerges. Silence eventually ceases to be a strategy. It becomes a state of being. It is the natural expression of someone who is increasingly living from the self, the central unifying archetype of wholeness. At this point, you're not using silence. You are silent, in the deepest sense of the word. The noise has stopped, not because you forced it, but because you've arrived at a place where noise is unnecessary. Jung described the self as our life's goal. When you touch this center, even intermittently, the compulsive need to explain, justify, or prove yourself simply falls away. It's not that you have nothing to say. It's that you no longer need saying to confirm your existence. Your presence becomes your statement. Your being communicates more than your speech ever could. You become like a deep lake, calm on the surface, holding immense depth underneath, reflecting the sky without effort. Think of certain figures known for their quiet depth. The actor Keanu Reeves, for instance, has navigated profound personal losses and massive fame with a notable peaceful silence. He doesn't explain his life, he lives it. That absence of noise isn't emptiness, it's a profound presence that people feel intensely. He is not defending a story, he is embodying a person. His power is in his containment, not his exposition. He has, it seems, reached a point where the persona is a tool for his work, not the master of his identity. The real man exists in a quiet space behind it, and that space radiates a kind of gravity that loudness never could. This is the final stage. The silence is no longer a wall to protect a fragile inner flame. It is the calm air in the center of a strong, steady flame. There is no crackle, only heat and light. You no longer fear misunderstanding, because you are no longer seeking understanding from outside. Your value is an internal fact, not a social negotiation. You realize that no one needs to know the details of your journey to respect its destination. Your calm becomes a signal that you are at home within yourself, and that home is a fortress that requires no loud defense. In this integrated state, the brain reflects the calm. The amygdala's alarm quiets. The prefrontal cortex, associated with wise judgment, takes the lead. This is the neurobiology of Jung's individuation. And in this space, not revealing his instinct. You don't share plans because you're too engaged in the action. You don't share fears because you're in conscious relationship with them. You don't announce departures because you're already moving. You don't boast success because you're immersed in the next meaningful challenge. Sharing, when it happens, is no longer a need. It's a choice, a gift, offered from a place of overflow, not lack. 7. The alchemy of wholeness and the end of seeking. This journey from strategic silence to essential silence culminates in what we might call the alchemy of wholeness. The protected parts, the plans, the fears, the old selves, the successes, are no longer separate fragments to be hidden. Through the process of holding them in the inner sanctum, they have been metabolized. They have become integrated. The plan transformed into identity. The fear transformed into wisdom. The departed path transformed into experience. The success transformed into unassuming confidence. They are now part of the bedrock of your being, not items in your display case or skeletons in your closet. In this state, the very concept of revealing changes. It's not about disclosure or concealment anymore. It's about expression. And expression arises naturally, appropriately, and without anxiety. You speak when it serves connection or creation, not when you seek validation or relief. Your words carry weight because they aren't straining to prove anything. They simply are. They emerge from the fullness of your experience, not the emptiness of your need. This is the most attractive force in the human realm. A person who is complete in themselves. They don't pull on your energy. They radiate a calm that gives energy. They are listeners, not because they are passive, but because they are so full they have space to receive. Modern life, with its cult of personal branding and oversharing, militates against this. It confuses visibility with value and noise with influence, but the deepest influence has always been silent. The parent whose calm assurance anchors a child, the leader whose quiet resolve steadies a team, the artist whose work speaks volumes while they say nothing. This is the influence of the self. It doesn't shout to be heard, it is felt. It doesn't demand attention, it commands respect through sheer substantiality. When you cultivate this inner silence, You step out of the exhausting economy of attention and into the grounded economy of being. Your energy is no longer a currency you spend on managing impressions. It is a resource you invest in living a meaningful life. So, how do you start? You begin with observation. Notice what happens when you have an impulse to share. Pause. Ask yourself, from which place within me does this urge arise? Is it from a place of fullness, wanting to contribute, or from a place of lack, wanting to be filled? Is it the self wanting to express, or the ego wanting approval? That moment of pause is the birthplace of conscious silence. You don't have to never speak. You learn to speak consciously, from center. You protect what is germinating. You honor what is healing. You move in silence when you are changing direction. You let your results speak in their own time. And gradually, you will feel the noise within you settle. The static of what will they think will fade, and in that clear space, you will hear the one voice that matters, the quiet, sure voice of your own becoming. So here is the simple, transformative truth that runs through all of this. Your deepest power has never resided in what you say, but in your ability to listen to yourself in a world that never stops talking. Silence, in the Jungian sense, is the container where the self assembles. It is not a lack. It is a profound presence. It is the fertile void from which all authentic creation emerges. By learning what to hold in sacred silence, your forming plans, your unintegrated fears, your quiet departures, and your personal victories, you aren't building a fortress. You are tending a garden. You are giving the most authentic parts of you the darkness, the moisture, the undisturbed time they need to root deeply and grow strong enough to withstand any weather. You are practicing a radical form of self-fidelity. The ultimate gift of this practice is that it brings you home to yourself. Without rush, without display, free from the pulling gaze of external eyes. And in that homecoming, you'll find a quiet confidence that needs no announcement, a strength that speaks through your calm, and a presence that others will feel long before you ever utter a word. You become a mystery, not in the sense of being confusing, but in the original sense of the word, a truth that is known deeply, but cannot be fully articulated, only experienced. And in a world of endless explanation, that experiential truth is the most powerful thing you can offer, both to yourself and to others. Start by guarding your inner world. Protect your becoming. And watch, in the quiet, as you transform.